If 15 years ago you'd told me I'd be sitting down to begin writing a book about dogs, I'd have laughed. What I knew about dogs could have been written on the back of a postage stamp. After all, I was 40 before I even had a dog of my own. It wasn't for the lack of wanting. As a boy, I and my younger sister Andrea often asked our parents if we could have a pet. My mum and dad maintained it wouldn't be fair because we wouldn't be home enough. But there was something my dad used to say, which I realise now, after he's gone, had great significance. It's too upsetting when they go. When I was older, he told me a story from his childhood that explained perfectly why he felt this way. I've included it later because this is a book of stories, the stories of dogs I've met and the people who love them. I'll begin with my own. I grew up dogless in a market town in North Yorkshire called Selby. It was all right, which is Yorkshire speak for very good indeed. I had a great childhood. My dad was an electrician in the sugar factory, and my mum was a swimming teacher at the local swimming baths, as was her mother before her. Later, I passed my 11 plus exam by the skin of my teeth, and I went off to school in Leeds by train. It was a huge, great metropolis. It seemed to 11-year-old me that nobody in Selby had ever been further than Leeds or York. The first dog I remember was a miniature apricot-coloured poodle called Pepe. He moved into a bungalow opposite where we lived. He was a sweet thing, and we'd ride our bikes around and he'd always be there. Now, funnily enough, the first dog I ever lived with was also a poodle. This one was called Noodle, and he belonged to my pretend daughter, April. I've never liked the word step when it comes to parenting, as in stepdaughter. It seems to always to go alongside wicked. Anyway, I met April's mum. Noodle the poodle was already a firm fixture, and he and I got along just fine. In the years that followed, I came to know a couple of Rottweilers who were big, lovable lumps. There's something very reassuring about a solid dog, and I figured that if I was going to get a dog, I might as well go for the full fat option. And so a Rottweiler puppy called Axel entered my life. My first dog from scratch. Not being one to do things by half, I got another one 9 months later. There's something magical about having a dog from puppyhood. We went to visit the breeder 3 times before we picked Axel. The first time when he was just 3 weeks old. Later, when he was a great big 50-kilo power pack of a boy, it amused me to tell people that there was a time I could hold him in one hand. Having a puppy taught me that you've got to do things again and again and again. Because you teach them little things like sit or down and you think they've got it, you might be inclined to assume, great, that's that then. Now, it's not, because tomorrow it seems as if they've forgotten and you have to tell them again. You've got to have patience, and that's not something that came naturally to me. I was working for Weetabix in Northamptonshire when I got Axel. I was an operations manager, so I ran factories for a living. I came to it in an odd way via a Hispanic Studies degree from the University of Hull. Weetabix was a long way from languages, and dogs were a long way from Weetabix. When I got the job in my final year at uni, and I announced it to my housemates, they all fell about laughing. They thought it was a joke because my diet mostly involved Weetabix for breakfast, lunch, and tea. I worked for the company for 21 years, starting off as a graduate trainee and then as a supervisor of about 8 people, making Alpen in a little factory in Corby. I worked my way up from there, and by the time I left, I was reporting to a company director and had about 200 people in my team. It was Axel that got me into dog training. I'd already started to do the best job I possibly could with him because I always believed that if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. So this was my first time with a puppy, and it was a pretty serious breed. Back in those days, in the early 2000s, Rottweilers were very much the media's designated evil breed. The tabloid press just loved to show pictures of them baring their teeth. Whenever there was a dog attack, often involving completely different breeds, they'd roll out a stock picture of a Rottweiler and caption it with the cliché of devil dog. I was determined to be a responsible dog owner. I was also a serving special police officer at the time, so I wanted to do the right thing and train Axel properly. I threw myself into learning as much as I possibly could. Then 9 months later, Gordon, the second Rottweiler, came along. And now I had not one but 2 of these great big dogs. It was a serious proposition.